but we cannot have our testimonies exist apart from the objective truths of Scripture, the objective facts of the resurrection, the objective historical, like you can't divorce it completely, right? But the strengths of testimony are you don't have to know all of those things to share your testimony.
Yeah.
You can say, man, I don't know the answers to all your questions. I don't know the quote, the scripture or verse for this or that. All I know is what Jesus did in my life. And you can stand on that. All you have to know is your testimony.
Yeah.
And it's simple. This is who I was before I met Jesus.
Yeah.
This is what happened when I met Jesus.
Yeah.
This is the change that's come since.
Yeah.
If you can talk about those three things, who were you before Jesus? Where did you meet Jesus? What it's been like since? That's your testimony.
Welcome to Let's Talk About That, the podcast where we deep dive into Sunday's message and explore your questions. I'm your host, Astin Kahnk, and I'm excited to share this journey with you. Whether you're a longtime member of the Orchard or a first-time visitor, Let's Talk About That is your space to explore, reflect, and connect. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of faith, spirituality, and daily life, seeking to understand how the wisdom shared on Sundays can be applied to our modern challenges. So, grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable space, and let's dive in together. This is Let's Talk About That, where the conversation about Sunday's message never stops. Well, welcome back to Let's Talk About That. Chip, how's it going?
You know, at the moment, it's going pretty well. But in, 3.5 hours, we're going to be driving down to kids camp.
Yeah, I see.
And I can't promise at that point.
You've had some sugar.
Yeah.
You've had some caffeine.
Yeah.
You ready to take on the week?
Nope. No, I love kids camp. Kids camp I really do. I love kids camp. The kids camp that we go to, Central Kid, is probably the best, big brand camp that's out there, in my opinion. They do a great job with it. And, every year I've gone at the Orchard, Leanne and I have had a kid going, whether it be your oldest or youngest.
Yeah.
And the one year that they would have overlapped, I think, was COVID year or something like that. Yeah. But there's been one of them every year. And this is our youngest, Chasen's, last year.
Oh, wow.
But it's not going to be my last year at camp because I made the decision a while back that as a lead pastor that I'm just going to keep going to kids camp every year.
Yeah.
Because it gives me a chance to, hang out with the kids from our locations. If your kid is going to kids camp, you're probably pretty invested in the Orchard, And so it gives me a chance to hang out with them, get to know them. I try to spend time with, each kid a little bit at camp, and then always, take a little bit extra money down there to buy them a snow cone and ice cream, while we're there. And so that's fun. And I'm not doing student camp. They're not scared of me like the kids are too if I get loud. So, but I like kids camp. It's fun. So I am looking forward to it, but it is a long week.
Yeah.
It is a long week. They're not the best beds.
Yeah.
And I'm not the best sleeper, but I am doing something this year.
What are you doing?
A pack-to-box fan.
Okay. So it's no air conditioning. It's camp.
Oh, no. There's air conditioning. Okay. I just like to sleep in an igloo. And
it drowns out the noise. Yep. As a parent, I feel you on that level.
Yeah. So anyway, it'll be good. It'll be good. How about you, Astin? Did you have a good weekend?
I did. So Chip, guess what I did let me rewind this. Guess what I watched for the first time Saturday night and last night.
So if you hadn't said Saturday night, you just went with last night. I would have went with, for the first time, you watched a UFC fight on the lawn of the White House.
I did not. That is incorrect.
I didn't either. Oh my gosh. We live in an alternate reality sometimes.
No. So it's your obsession.
Which one?
Well, the one that you have the light in your office.
You mean the bat signal?
That. I watched Batman for the first time.
So Michael Keaton Batman, Val Kilmer Batman, Ben Affleck Batman, Christian Bale Batman.
Whichever one that has Heath Ledger as the Joker series.
Yeah, that's Christian Bale. Christian Bale. So you said Heath Ledger is the Joker. Did you watch all three?
Okay.
Or did you watch just the second?
So Friday night, Brandon was watching the second half of, I think, the third one.
Okay. With the guy who talks, you can't really understand him.
Yeah, it has
Yeah, that's Bane.
That guy, yeah. And so I was like, what is this? And he was like, just be quiet. Just watch it. He has the subtitles on because I asked questions.
Everybody always has subtitles on. If you're over 30, you have to have subtitles on.
And he didn't do subtitles until we started dating because I asked too many questions. And he's like, that way I can read it and I can hear you at the same time. So I was sitting down and I was watching. I was like, okay, this is pretty good. And I was like, what is this? He's like, it's Batman. I was like, oh, so do you is this just the only one? And he looked at me and he's like, no, there's 3. And so
it isn't as a great trilogy.
Okay, it is really good. And so he was like, I was like, oh, well, tomorrow night, let's watch the first one. He's like, okay. He's like, I just watched, I guess the third one was The Dark Knight Rises. And the second one is, okay. So he would watch it. He had finished The Dark Knight. So I made him watch the first one. And I couldn't make it through the whole movie. So he had to rewatch.
What?
I know, I'm lame. And then so we watched The Dark Knight. Just The Dark Knight.
Which did you like better, Batman Begins or The Dark Knight?
I think maybe Batman, you said Batman Begins?
Yeah.
And maybe that one. I don't know.
See, the second one, Heath Ledger's a joker. The second movie's elite. Dark Knight it's elite. It's great. However, Batman Begins is phenomenal too. As a matter of fact, I have one of my favorite ever sermon illustrations that I pull out of Batman.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So having seen the movie, Astin, you'll get this.
Okay.
All right. The bad guy to the movie is, who's the bad guy? Ra's al Ghul.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
okay.
he is getting ready to, that's what it was. He's getting ready to poison Gotham's water supply.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and he has that little thing that takes all the water out.
Yeah.
The vaporizes. Yeah.
And so they're taking the train,
yes,
right, to the center of the water tower, right? And he and Batman are fighting, right? Mm-hmm. Batman gets him down, has his little sharp metal batarang, in his hand. He's about to punch him and kill him, and then he stops and he doesn't do it. And then Ra's al Ghul says, you remember what he says? He said, that's why you can't beat me, because you won't kill me.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. You remember what Batman says at that point?
I only watched it one time. Chip, I can't quote movies like you can.
It's fine. Batman says, just because I won't kill you
doesn't mean I can't.
Doesn't mean I have to save you either.
Okay.
You remember? And then he jumps off the train because he sees that the train is heading off the rails and is going to crash.
Yes.
And so Ra's al Ghul goes off the tracks, dies, whatever. So here's my sermon illustration, right? God doesn't send anybody to hell. It is of our own free volition that we get on the train headed to our eternal destruction, right?
Yeah.
It is our choices, our actions, our rebellion against God. And when people go to hell, it's not because God sends them there. No, you're not good enough. You have to go to hell now.
Yeah.
No, we are all by default headed that way. And yet because of his grace and mercy, he saves those who will trust in him.
Wow.
And so just because I won't kill you doesn't mean I have to save you either. That kind of sparked something in my head. I was like, well, that's kind of what it is God doesn't have to send us to hell. We're already headed there on our own.
Yeah.
But by his grace, he does save some.
Wow. That was really cool to go from Dark Knight to that.
Yeah.
Or not Dark Knight, excuse me, Batman Begins.
Yeah, I was going to let it slide, but I'm glad you corrected yourself. It does me better now.
Well, let's keep on that train talking about Jesus. So yesterday we were week 2 of our sermon series, and you were over in Live Oak and Austin was in Lake City.
I was. How
was that?
I enjoy going to the other locations, get to catch up, see people that we hadn't seen. I think one of the things that I wish more people had the opportunity to do is just go to different locations and just be reminded of how much bigger the orchard is than any of us see on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Right? Because most people on a random Sunday morning, all you're going to see is your service that you attend, and yet your location is bigger than the service you attend.
For sure.
But the orchard is bigger than your location.
Yeah.
And so just kind of compounds. So I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I heard Austin was only mildly heretical here in Lake City. I'm just kidding. I heard Austin did a great job.
He did.
Here in Lake City. And, it's not often that 2 of our 4 teaching pastors are out, but it happens sometimes, right? And so Eddie was in the Bahamas. Matt was at the beach with the family. And so we asked Austin to step up in Lake City, and he did. And then the band stepped up in Lake City, so they didn't lead because Austin would probably be dead trying to lead 3 services and preach 3 services. So, but no, it was good. It was good. And I had somebody who really never says anything about our sermon series go, I really like this sermon series. It's a good one. And I was like, really? And they were like, no, it's a good one. I was like, why? Why is it? What do you think is good? And they go, I don't know. I like music, and hearing about these songs is interesting.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a good reminder too that, the songs that we sing on Sunday aren't those songs, I mean, a good majority of them, as we're seeing, are true testimonies of what has happened in a person's life. And again, like we talked about yesterday, our testimony is an act of worship. So I think it's just a good reminder that these artists don't just write these songs to write them. They write them from, proclamations from their heart.
Yeah. And it's, I think that's why I liked digging into the story behind My Jesus.
Yeah.
Is because when you hear it, it's kind of upbeat, celebratory. I said it like this in Live Oak. It's got a little bit of that Taylor County honky tonk, vibe in it. But you wouldn't realize just listening to it that it was born out of tragedy.
Yeah.
Is kind of where the origin of that song was. And I think when you understand that it came from, at least began with Ann Wilson losing her brother in an accident and then going into a period of healing and journaling and grieving. And you understand that's where it came from. It doesn't make it less. It makes it more.
Yeah.
Because when you hear, hey, he can do for you what he's done for me.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about my Jesus. Let my Jesus change your life. It became a testimony that she used. And so I thought that was really good and kind of added a layer to that song. And again, we're not preaching, quote unquote, on these songs and exegeting the text of the songs. Yeah. But we are saying, look, this is not just true in the song. This is a scriptural principle. And then we went to John 9 and saw, the testimony of the man born blind, which is it's an incredible story in the text anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think what I love about that song, My Jesus, is, and from personal experience as well, it's just a beautiful display that like joy and grief can coexist, that you can write an upbeat song about the expectation of like who Jesus is and the expectation of heaven, all while still grieving at the same time. Like they're made to coexist because of Jesus.
Yeah, I think that's spot on.
Yeah.
When you look at the story there in John chapter 9, I think there's something that I talked about in the text that kind of goes maybe unnoticed, but goes right to what you're talking about a little bit. So, if you're in John chapter 9 and you're reading it, if you weren't there on Sunday, it's an incredible story of this man who was blind from birth. Jesus, his disciples, they come across him. And when they see him, the disciples go, Rabbi, who sent this man or his parents that he was born blind? So, right. And we talked about this. There's that assumption that every bad thing in our life is because God's mad at us or we did something, Yes, sometimes we make stupid decisions and we have to live with the consequences of them. But by and large, we live in a world broken by sin. Yeah. And so Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, right? Not that they never sinned, but that, hey, that's not what caused this blindness. And then Jesus says, this came about so that God's works might be displayed in him, period. We must do the works of him who sent me while it is day, period. Night is coming when no man can work, period. Right? So here's something I think we can miss. And I want to go on record to say this interpretation of the text does not change the meaning of the text, the point of the story, anything. But I do think it kind of shades it in a different light that helps us understand some of what you were talking about how we can have joy and grief together, right? So when you look at this, number one, the New Testament was not written in English. It was written in Greek. And it wasn't written like English in the sense that their sentence structure is different. They did not have punctuation. Okay. Right? And so all the words kind of ran together. So those two things are important to know because when we read that sentence, this came about so that God's work might be displayed in him, period. That period is not in the original text. Okay. It's not in the earliest manuscripts. Okay. So we are assuming that was the end of the sentence. And there are scholars who have good reasons to think it was, but that's not in the original text. Okay. What is also not in the original text, literally, is the phrase, this came about. Okay. Now, again, there are reasons that the translators put that phrase in there. The main reason is that because the syntax of Greek sentences is so different from English, sometimes you have to put some filler words in there to make it flow, to make it make sense, to make it sound right. And so they put that phrase, this came about so that God's work might be displayed in him, because the first words in the Greek in that sentence are so that, right? So that God's work. But the reason I point that out is when you take that out and take out the period that both were not in the original text, you can read this passage. So that God's works might be displayed in him, we must do the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. And so the idea there is that instead of saying, hey, the reason he was born blind is so that I can perform this miracle in front of you. When you take away that this came about in the period, what you get when you read it literally is maybe Jesus didn't tell them why this happened. What he just said is, so that God's work can be displayed in him, we must do the works of him who sent me. So let's get busy.
Yeah.
Right. So let's do this.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, that doesn't drastically change the meaning of the text or anything, but it is important because sometimes when things happen in our lives, we get so hung up on the why that when we find them, they're not satisfying to us. They don't do what we want them to do, right? And so, for instance, if we were to say, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but the why behind him being more blind is so that God's work might be displayed in him, maybe we pause and say, maybe this guy would have rather just not been born blind. You know, maybe he would rather just been able to see from birth. Now, again, that doesn't really matter because at the end, what we want is always not what's best anyway. God is sovereign. So again, what I'm saying is that there's no way that Jesus is saying this is the reason. What I'm saying is there is a way to read the text literally where Jesus doesn't bother to give a reason. And I think that's important because sometimes the why doesn't matter as much as we think it does.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
The why is just not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Right? The big deal is Jesus saying, here's what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah.
And here's what I am going to do about it. So instead of the why or the how, why did this happen? How is this working together in God's plan? Understanding the what am I going to do with what I'm facing? And what is God doing in me?
Yeah.
And then the who is the one behind all this and control of all this? I think those answers are far more important than why and how.
Yeah. Because like in life, I mean, you're not guaranteed to even have a why this side of heaven. Like you may have it, I mean, this side of the earth, like you may not get that answer at all. So it's like you have to hold on to that. What is he doing and who is doing it?
That's right. That's right. And I think I think that's super important. So when I look at that, you know, that was a big deal for me, you know, because having walked through loss, when people say, oh, God has a plan, God has a purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so glad that that's true. It's just not doing for me what you think it's doing right now.
Yeah.
And about the 15th time you hear that, you're like, would you like to come in my office and look at the degrees hanging on my wall? I know full well what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's just not doing what you think it's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel you on that. All right. So you kind of talked about, you know, obviously when those situations happen, not to focus on the why. We know the who, but also kind of wanted to lean in to what you asked earlier. That what do we do with that? So when we have a situation, we see God work, what do we do with it?
Yeah, I think, and this was really the heart of the message someday, the heart of my Jesus. And man, the Miss Abby testimony video, or Sister Abby, that was so good.
I've seen that. I watched that video in Communicators, and then I watched it 3 times on Sunday. And every time I watched it, I felt like it hit my heart that much deeper.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh.
So good. And the point of it is that our struggles, our hurts, the tragedies we face in life, we can choose to use those for testimony.
Yeah.
Right. What we do with it is we turn them to testimony.
Absolutely.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what you see the man born blind do, right?
Yeah.
It is as soon as he's healed, and we can jump back in the text, honestly, like as soon as he's healed, said his neighbors came seeing him. Isn't this the one who used to sit begging? Some said he's the one. Others say, no, but he looks like him. So number one, I think that's a hilarious pun.
Yeah.
No, he looks like like the blind. Anyway, I thought I don't know if that's intended, but I thought it was funny. And said, so they asked him, how were your eyes open? He answered, the man called Jesus, made mud, spread it on my eyes, told me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and I received my sight. So number one, when we give testimony, the testimony of Sister Abby, of Ann Wilson, it can be that much deeper because we know my Jesus. Yeah. Right? We know the Jesus who, you know, has risen from the grave, who has died for our sins. We know what the scriptures say about him. We know all this about him. This guy didn't. This guy was like, some guy named Jesus, came around. But yet that was his testimony. I don't know. This guy named Jesus. Matter of fact, they said, where is he? The guy says, I don't know. I don't know. In my mind's eye, I'm thinking about this. And they said, well, where did he go? Where's he at? And he goes, brother, I was blind. I didn't see which way he went. Like I don't know where he's at. And then they take him to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees put him on trial, and they ask him, they bring his parents in, they ask him again. And finally, this guy said, I've already told you everything I know. One thing I know, I was blind. Now I see.
Period.
I was blind. Now I see. That's my story. That's my testimony.
Yeah.
And there was a quote that I think it was Austin who found it for us for the message this week from Pastor Brian Bell. It said, you may not be an authority on theology, but you are the world's greatest authority on what happened to you.
So good.
Right? That's so spot on when it comes to testimony. Like, I can't argue. I mean, I can argue theology with you. I can't argue your testimony. I can't argue your personal experience of what has happened to you. And so maybe let's lean in for a minute and talk about testimony, because I think there's a good and a bad when it comes to testimony. Sure. Let's, number one, talk about the bad. Yeah. And when I say bad, maybe that's not the right word. Maybe weakness is the right word. There's a weakness to the testimony. And that is part of what Brian Bell says in his quote. We can argue theology, but you're the world's authority on what's happened to you. What that means is that your experience is entirely subjective. And so I can't tell you what you experience, what all of this. I can offer some objective insight into maybe why, but at the end of the day, it's totally subjective to you. And that is good in some sense, because we all have a personal experience with Jesus where he frees us from sin. He changes us. He changes from the inside out. However, even a Muslim or a Buddhist can have a testimony. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they can tell you about their experience and what it's done for them. And so I think that's the weakness there, is that while you are an authority on your testimony is not authoritative. Does that make sense? Now, what was authoritative about this man's testimony in John 9 is it was not just subjective. It was very objective. I was blind. Now I see. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Something happened. Yeah. And so when we use our testimonies are a powerful tool in talking about Jesus, but we cannot have our testimonies exist apart from the objective truths of Scripture, the objective facts of the resurrection, the objective historical, like you can't divorce it completely. Right. But the strengths of testimony are, you don't have to know all of those things to share your testimony. Yeah. You can say, man, I don't know the answers to all your questions. I don't know the quote, the scripture or verse for this or that. All I know is what Jesus did in my life. And you can stand on that. I shared a story in Live Oak. Honestly, it was only in the first service because I was running out of time. Preacher got long-winded. But when I was in college, I came back home one weekend for the Florida Forest Festival. Do you know what the Florida Forest Festival is? I have
no idea what that is.
It is a yearly festival. It takes place in Perry, Florida, the pine tree capital of the South. And it is, I'm not sure it still is, at one time in Guinness World Book of Records, it was the world's largest free fish fry. You fry fish, go up and get a plate. Free fish fry, right? So I went back up for it. It just so happened to be the opening weekend of muzzleloading season. And before I went to the festival, I was going to go hunt. So I'm sitting on a ground blind hunting, looking at an intersection of the road. I can see down one, see both ways on the other. And while I'm looking, and don't ever tell my dad, he doesn't listen to the podcast, so he won't hear this. I may have been nodding off a little bit in the stand, but when I look up and look over, I saw an ostrich.
An ostrich?
An ostrich in the road. Okay. Scared me to death. Couldn't get a shot off. Ostrich walked off the road.
Were you trying to look? Were you hunting ostriches?
I was not. I was hunting deer. To be fair.
Okay. I was still confused there.
Yeah. So was I. So I called my dad and I'm like, Dad, never going to guess what I saw. I saw an ostrich in the road. He's like, you did not see an ostrich. I was like, 100% I saw an ostrich. And he was like, no, you were falling asleep and you think you saw an ostrich. And I was like, I wasn't falling asleep at all.
What are you talking about? Yeah.
I saw an ostrich. And so for like 10 years, this was a debate in the Parker family because I saw a dadgum ostrich. It was an ostrich. And I'll never forget, it was like 10 plus years later. Dad calls me one day, says, well, I need to tell you something. I'm like, okay, what's going on? So, well, I was talking to a guy who owns some land right there by our hunting lease. And one of the other guys that owned some land right there by our hunting lease back when you were in college back a few years before that, had gotten really big into the emu market.
Stop.
And when the bottom fell out, he just turned them all loose in the wild. So you did not see an ostrich, but you probably saw an emu. And I was like, it was an ostrich, but it was. Yeah. So, it was crazy. But here's kind of why I think that can play into what we're talking about is that, look, you may not be able to talk about the why or the how or whatever happened to you, but when you have your testimony, you don't have to know any of that. You just have to say, no, this is what happened.
Yeah.
This is what happened. And then as you grow in your faith, as you deepen in your walk with Jesus, years down the road, you may be able to unpack that a little bit better. You may start to learn the whys or the hows or whatever. But when the strength of your testimony is, all you have to know is your testimony.
Yeah.
And it's simple. This is who I was before I met Jesus.
Yeah.
This is what happened when I met Jesus.
Yeah.
This is the change that's come since.
Yeah.
If you can talk about those three things, who were you before Jesus? Where did you meet Jesus? What it's been like since? That's your testimony.
Yeah.
And that's what this guy did.
Yeah.
He said, I was blind.
Yeah.
He put mud on my eyes, told me to go wash. I washed. I can see.
Yeah.
And so I think while testimonies do have that weakness of being subjective and not entirely authoritative, the strength is that it's your story. And you don't have to know all the answers to all the questions. You just have to know your story and be able to talk about it.
All right. So I kind of wanted to lean into the story, the aspect of the blind man. So, he mentions that he, spits in the ground, uses the mud, puts it on his eyes. What do you think the significance in that is? Was there like some pagan practice where maybe they used to do that? And so kind of like, is there any significance behind? Because, Jesus could just say, hey, you see and you see, but instead he did that. So I kind of want to lean into that.
So a couple of things. Number one is when you look at the New Testament, I don't know of one time that Jesus did the same thing the same way, right? Yeah. Because he fed the 5,000, he fed the 4,000, he fed them differently. This isn't the only blind man that he gave sight. He did it differently. This is the only, he just did things differently.
Yeah.
Part of that, I think, is to teach us dependence on him. Like if Jesus did the same thing the same way, we would make it a formula and try to sell bestseller copies. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you want to heal blind people in your church? Here's what you do. You spit in the ground and make mud.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's the first one. The second one is 100% this was a pagan practice.
Okay.
Well, I say 100%. 100% of what I read said that this was a pagan practice back in the day. And I don't think that means Jesus was participating in pagan practices.
Yeah.
I think Jesus was being very sarcastic and thumbing his nose at pagan practices because they thought the power was in the spit in the ground, make the mud, whatever.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, no, it's in me.
Yeah.
Because I think if you kind of read between the lines of the story of the man born blind, that his parents seemed to still be involved in his life, which was a little uncommon.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'd be abandoned if they were born blind with birth defects and all. And so because of that, we can probably guess that his parents did everything they could to see if he could be healed. And that might have included taking him to some pagan practices that did the very same thing Jesus did. But when they did them and he wasn't healed, they were like, oh, sorry, this must not work for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think when Jesus does this, it's him saying it's not the practice, it's the person. Like it's not the how, it's the who, and I'm the one doing it. I can spit and make mud, rub it in your eyes, or I can tell you to open your eyes.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter because I'm the one who has the power.
Yeah.
And so I think both of those things probably play into it there. And I think that's also a good reason for us to make sure we're doing a good job of like, don't just read the scriptures, study the scriptures. There's just so much out there that can unpack a lot of this for you, that a simple Google search or a website or buying just a couple 1-volume commentaries, it just helps, and I think that's unlocks some of that deeper stuff that we see in the scriptures.
Yeah. All right. So thinking about that same story, I sit in on the Thursday online recorded message, and something Robert said that stuck out to me. He said that faith stops being borrowed and he becomes your Jesus when you have like those testimonies. So thinking about like, maybe you've gone to church your entire life and then you have this just impactful moment with Jesus. I think that's that turning point for a lot of people when it goes from just religion to like a relationship, when he becomes like that, he's your Jesus.
Yeah, I think when I hear that, what it makes me remember is I heard somebody say when I became a pastor one time, an older person at church, and it's been true. As the pastor, you go from when you first come to a church to being the pastor, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
To then being our pastor.
Yeah.
And then eventually, but often through tragedy or hard times or big life changes, you become my pastor.
Yeah.
You know, and you hear it in how people introduce you.
Yeah.
Hey, this is the pastor, right?
Yeah.
This is our pastor. Or, hey, let me introduce you to Chip. This is my pastor.
Yeah.
And I've seen that. I've seen it when I pastored in Mayo. I've seen it here at the Orchard. And I think that same thing's almost true with Jesus, right? Because he's the great shepherd. He's the better pastor. And so he's the big man upstairs, the Lord. He's our savior. But when you've walked through him, with him through things in life, it's my Jesus, you know, and that's what Ann Wilson talked about in the song. Hey, let me tell you about my Jesus. She'd written in her journal over and over, my Jesus. That's what Sister Abby said, you know, in that video. You know, it was her passion was praying about her Jesus. She didn't want to talk about all the things that happened to her. She's going to talk about her Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's 100% that personal, hey, this is a step beyond just something that I know cognitively, something that I bought into culturally. No, this is something that's now personal to me because this is my Jesus.
Yeah. So what would you say to the person that maybe is in the middle of something tragic or maybe is on the outer skirts of it and sees those moments like Ann Wilson where it's my Jesus or Sister Abby? How do they go if they maybe are new to their faith or maybe don't know Jesus? How do they go from that moment of like heartbreak to like then like my Jesus?
Man, I would say that, and I'll just zero in, especially if they don't know Jesus before they go through the tragedy. Number one, anytime we go through any kind of real life change, whether good or bad, opens the door, I think, to have these faith conversations. But secondly, if you don't have that foundation before you experience something difficult, hard, and tragic, it's not easy to get that foundation at that point.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important that we have that foundation, that personal relationship early, so that we have an anchor for our souls before the storm comes. You know, if you're out in the Gulf and you wait till you're in the middle of a storm and the rains are rolling to try to throw your anchor out, it may catch. Yeah. But it's going to be tough. Yeah. If you get that anchor stuck before the waves start coming and the storm blows in, then you're going to hold, you know, and I think that that's why it's so hard. So honestly, I don't really know what I would say to somebody who is going through that and doesn't have that foundation. You know, I think I might just try to show them Jesus more than coach them to Jesus.
Love on them and show them Jesus.
And then on the backside, maybe come in and show some of that. But I think the biggest thing is that's why it's so important for us to live as informal missionaries right now.
At all times,
about this right now, because we want those people in our life to get that foundation, to get that anchor before the storm goes in.
Yeah, I always think about, you know, on those mountaintop moments of life, it's easy to trust and obey God and follow him, but it's like you almost like need those mountaintop moments to anchor you in those valley moments when you're desperate and you don't know which way to turn. Because I know in my life, whenever I've had very, very hard situations, you know, people ask, how do you? And I'm like, it's Jesus. Because if it wasn't Jesus, I would not be able to handle the crushing moments of life.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they would be debilitating.
Well, I think I heard somebody say this, it was a funeral director, and he's the first one who made me notice this. He said, if you watch, when you have a believing family and an openly unbelieving family, the way they grieve in the funeral process is different. And what he had said is there was a family who was using our church for their funeral who was an openly unbelieving, unchurched family. And he said, I'm going to need to go back and get some more Kleenexes. And I was like, we got a bunch. He goes, no, you don't have enough. He said, you have enough if this is a church family. And my goodness, he was right, because when you grow up in a Christian bubble, you don't see that. Yeah. But when you see that, you're like, oh my goodness, we do have a hope that we don't even realize in the midst of this. We do have a foundation that we don't even realize in the midst of this. When you see somebody go through it who doesn't have it at all, it's like, oh, I get it. I get it. This is different. And so, 100%.
Yeah. Well, Chip, any lasting thoughts you want to leave us with before we close out our episode?
Well, I don't know about lasting thoughts, but I guess it will be my last thought, because I'm getting kicked off the podcast for a month is what I hear.
Yes, you are. Yes. So in case you didn't know, Momcast, well, let me backpedal this. So whenever we had our 100th episode, we asked people, I think it was a 100th episode, when we asked people what their when they asked what their favorite episode was, unanimously.
Whoa. We're not going to say unanimously. We're going to say A large margin.
A large margin. Sure, Chip. A large margin said that Momcast episodes were the ones that they listen to the most. So you asked.
Well, that's because guys don't comment on posts, but whatever. Go ahead.
Whatever. So you guys
I love the Momcast. I can't die.
I know you
I
don't.
love the Momcast.
I know you do. So Momcast is taking over the month of July. So listeners, this is where I need your help. I am currently orchestrating just different people from each location, Brantford, Live Oak, and Lake City, to be represented on the podcast. But where I need your help is we would love to hear from you about just topics that interest you that you'd love to hear these ladies talk about, whether it be about marriage, kids, if you're an empty nester, life, whatever it is, we want to be able to have a conversation around those questions. So you can go to our website, you can click on podcasts and scroll down to the bottom and submit your questions there. Or you can email your questions to info@theorchardcc.org. And yeah, we'll get those questions.
Is that because their question is asking for info or because you're gathering the info of the questions?
Coming in.
You said email to info@theorchard. Is it because their questions are asking for info and that's why they're emailing to info@theorchard, or that you are gathering the info of the questions?
The info of the questions. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. My brain is not braining this morning. That's what it is. Chip is way more
caffeinated. Shut it up.
Neurons are flying a lot faster than mine are. Glad we're not recording
this on Friday.
Yes. Well, thanks again, Chip, for joining us. Good luck at Kids Camp.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yes.
And Hunger Games salute for all of you who cannot see me on the podcast.
Yes. And also, listeners, if you can be praying for, we have a team down in the Bahamas this week. Pray for them that God would just do a mighty work, not only in their team, but also in the people of Grand Bahama Island, as well as our kids camp, because I know God's going to do a mighty work this week, and we're excited to hear those stories. But that's all we got. Chip?
Be excited for the Momcast.
Yes, it'll be good. All right. Have a great week. We'll see you then.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About That. We hope it encouraged and challenged you as we continue to grow on this journey of faith and embrace community together. If you have more questions, thoughts, or feedback, we want to hear from you. Be sure to reach out to us through our social media or visit our website to stay connected. If you found today's discussion meaningful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Until next time, we hope that this episode inspired you and will keep Sunday's message at the front of your mind. See you next week.